Look at me when I say this. You've been fighting battles God never called you to fight. You've been trying to prove yourself in rooms God already closed the door on, and you're tired not because you're weak, but because you keep pouring into things that ain't pouring back. Listen to me. 2025 is not the year of impressing. It's the year of detaching. And you owe it to yourself to stop surviving in spaces where you were born to reign. Stop apologizing for evolving. Stop shrinking to make other people feel comfortable with your growth. Stop calling it loyalty when it's really bondage. You owe it to yourself this year, not to prove you're strong by holding on, but by being wise enough to let go. I'm not talking about letting go of people out of hate. I'm talking about releasing everything that no longer aligns with who you're becoming. You owe that to your purpose. You can't take the throne if you're still holding on to the chains. You want peace, but you keep entertaining chaos. You want clarity, but you stay connected to confusion. You keep praying for strength, but strength comes when you make the hard decision to walk away from the familiar. Familiar ain't always faithful. Just because it's known doesn't mean it's right. Sometimes the only reason you're stuck is because you're addicted to what's killing you slowly. It's time to take your power back. And hear me, emotional detachment is not coldness. It's not arrogance. It's divine warfare. It's how warriors move. You can't get caught in your feelings every time someone doesn't clap for you. Every time a door closes, every time your name isn't called, that's not rejection. That's redirection. You've been crying about what walked away, not realizing it was God clearing your runway. The plane doesn't take off while it's crowded with excess baggage. And let me be clear, you're not angry. You're attached. You're not broken. You're invested in things that never invested in you. But when you decide to detach, when you decide to release your need to control how it plays out, now you're dangerous. Now you're walking in authority. Now you're moving with focus. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop proving and start producing. You've been given too much access to people who were never assigned to your journey. That's why you're drained. That's why you're questioning your worth. But you got to understand, not everyone can go with you. Purpose requires separation. And the higher you go, the lighter you have to travel. You can't keep carrying guilt, shame, fear, and opinion and think you're going to soar. Some of y'all are in spiritual chains because your heart is still tied to people God already delivered you from. Stop calling it love when it's really fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being misunderstood, fear of letting go. But hear me, there is a version of you on the other side of that fear that is free, focused, and unshakable. That version of you is waiting on the now, you to wake up, to say no more. I choose my future over my feelings. I choose purpose over pain. I choose calling over comfort. You owe it to yourself to heal, not for them, for you. You owe it to yourself to rise, not for approval, for impact. You owe it to yourself to walk away from the trauma loop, from the self-doubt, from the apology tour you've been living on, trying to make everybody else feel okay about your glow-up. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand you. Your job is not to be liked. Your job is to be obedient to the call on your life. Listen, the enemy doesn't attack empty vessels. The resistance you're feeling is proof that you're carrying something powerful. And it's not that they don't see it. It's that they do. But you got to decide. Are you going to spend another year seeking validation, or will you finally step into who you were born to be? This is the year of detachment, discipline, and destiny. You've cried enough. You've explained yourself enough. You've waited long enough. Now it's time. Not next year. Now, you owe it to yourself in 2025 to stop carrying dead weight, to stop revisiting old chapters, to stop watering what won't grow. You owe it to yourself to stop playing small when you were born to shape nations. And I came here to tell you, you are not too late, too broken, or too behind. You are right on time for what God is about to do through you. But you got to move. You got to detach. You got to believe that peace is more important than popularity, that vision is more powerful than validation, and that obedience is more valuable than opportunity. 2025 is waiting for you to decide. You owe it to yourself not to become what they expect, but to become who you were always destined to be. You owe it to yourself to be free. You were not born to carry everything, only what aligns with your purpose. There is a weight that doesn't belong to you. And too often people confuse compassion with obligation. They confuse kindness with captivity. But the truth is, just because you can carry something doesn't mean you should. Just because it's close to you doesn't mean it's connected to your calling. There are burdens you've been picking up out of habit, out of fear, out of guilt, but none of that is tied to your divine assignment. And if it's not tied to your assignment, it's a distraction. A heavy, draining, soul-clogging distraction that will wear you out before you ever reach the place you were meant to walk into. Carrying the unnecessary is not noble. It's disobedient. Every time you say yes to what's not yours, you say no to what is. Every time you take on someone else's battle that God never told you to fight, you delay your own breakthrough. It's not selfish to let go. It's strategic. If the enemy can't destroy you, he'll distract you with things that seem good but aren't God. You weren't created to fix everyone. You weren't designed to be everyone's anchor. You weren't meant to stretch yourself so thin trying to be everything to everyone that you end up being nothing to yourself. Some of you are carrying emotional weights, relationships, old expectations, identities that expired 5 seasons ago. You're still trying to live up to who people used to need you to be. And God is saying, I've released you from that. Why are you still picking it up? Every time you carry something God told you to lay down, you're telling him you trust your ability more than his plan. That's not faith. That's fear dressed up in control. It's fear of disappointing people, fear of being misunderstood, fear of letting someone down. But here's the truth. What God assigns you to carry will not drain you. It will develop you. When it's yours, it fits. When it's yours, there's grace for it. But when it's not, it becomes a weight that breaks you from the inside out. And many people are spiritually exhausted, not because they're doing too little, but because they're doing too much of what they were never called to do. You can't fulfill your purpose trying to live out someone else's. And you can't walk in peace while carrying chaos that was never your cross to bear. It's time to take inventory. What are you holding on to that God told you to release? Who are you rescuing that God is trying to refine? Where are you pouring your time and energy that bears no fruit? You weren't born to carry everything. You were born to carry purpose. Let everything else go. Because when you release the unnecessary, you make room for the supernatural. And that's where your real power lives. Detachment is the discipline of the focus. The people who truly walk in power are not the ones chasing everything. They're the ones willing to walk away from anything that threatens their clarity. Focus isn't about doing more. It's about releasing what's not essential. When you are focused, you stop entertaining every distraction, every conversation, every emotion that pulls you off course. You don't answer every call. You don't attend every argument. You don't react to every opinion. Because you understand this, not everything deserves access to your energy. Not everything is worthy of your presence. There is a quiet strength in people who can detach without explanation. It's not because they don't care. It's because they care too much about the assignment to be casual with their time. When you are focused, you begin to realize that detachment is not rejection. It's protection. It's how you safeguard your mind, your spirit, and your future. You don't allow things to linger in your atmosphere that were only meant to pass through. You stop fighting to hold on to what God is trying to remove. Because when you are focused, you trust that what leaves your life is not greater than what's coming into it. People get distracted, not because they lack ambition, but because they lack boundaries. You can't be everything to everybody and still be who God called you to be. You can't keep every relationship, engage every emotion, and still have room for revelation. Focus demands sacrifice. Focus demands detachment. You have to learn how to say no, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. You have to let people misunderstand you, let people mislabel you, and keep moving anyway. Because you're not called to explain, you're called to execute. The undisciplined attach themselves to everything that feels good. The focused detach themselves from everything that doesn't grow them. You got to choose, do you want comfort or do you want calling? You can't have both. If you're going to fulfill purpose in 2025, you have to train your soul to let go of what's not serving the vision. You have to be willing to disappoint people to stay in alignment with God, because focus without detachment is impossible. You can't be loyal to your future while being tied to everything from your past. You're not cold. You're not distant. You're focused. And because you're focused, you've made peace with not being light. You've made peace with walking alone if it means walking in purpose. You've made peace with being misunderstood if it means being lying. Detachment is discipline. Detachment is maturity. Detachment is freedom. It's what keeps your soul light, your spirit clean, and your vision clear. So don't feel guilty for letting go. Feel powerful because you're finally choosing what matters most. What you don't release will rot your gift. When you hold on to what no longer serves you, you're not preserving strength, you're poisoning purpose. There's a divine cost to holding on to expired seasons, expired relationships, expired mindsets. The more you cling to what's dead, the more it contaminates what's still alive inside of you. You can't protect your potential and preserve your pain at the same time. Eventually, one will eat the other. And if you refuse to release, you'll wake up one day and wonder why your gift doesn't flow the way it used to, why your passion has faded, why your creativity feels trapped. It's because the old weight is sitting on top of your future, suffocating it. You were never meant to carry yesterday into today. Manna from heaven didn't last overnight because God never wanted the people to live off yesterday's provision. And you weren't created to live off expired emotions or outdated expectations either. Some of you are trying to pour new oil into old vessels. You're trying to walk into 2025 still carrying bitterness from 2020, still carrying offense from your childhood, still carrying guilt over things you didn't even cause. And you wonder why your spirit feels heavy, why your vision feels clouded, why your confidence feels broken. It's because you're still carrying rot and expecting it to produce fruit. Let it go. Not because it's easy, not because it doesn't hurt. Let it go because it's dangerous to keep it. What you don't release, you start to identify with. You begin to shape your life around pain, anger, shame, and slowly, without realizing it, you stop living from your gift and start living from your wounds. And wounded vision creates a distorted future. You start making decisions based on who hurt you instead of who you're becoming. You say yes to things out of fear instead of faith. You settle for less because you're too tied to the trauma. Believe you deserve more. The rotting doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. A little bitterness here, a little pride there, a little unforgiveness you won't confront. But over time, your gift starts to feel like a burden. Your joy starts to feel like a memory. And the fire you once had becomes ash because you never gave yourself permission to drop what was slowly killing your calling. Release isn't weakness, it's wisdom. When you release, you create space. When you release, you tell God, I trust you more than I trust my ability to fix this. That's faith. That's maturity. That's alignment. Because the truth is, your gift is too precious to be buried beneath what should have been left behind. You can't afford to rot. Not now. Not with this kind of destiny ahead of you. So take inventory. If it doesn't feed your future, it's robbing your purpose. And if it's rotting your spirit, it's time to release it before it takes more than it already has. Emotional freedom is the doorway to spiritual clarity. When your emotions are in charge, your spirit is muffled. You can't hear God clearly when your heart is full of noise. Confusion doesn't start in the spirit. It starts in the soul. And most people are not lost because they don't have a calling. They're lost because they can't see past the emotional fog. You're praying for answers while holding on to anger. You're seeking direction while clinging to fear. You're asking for clarity while still drowning in insecurity. That's not spiritual warfare. That's emotional clutter. And until you clear the clutter, the signal from heaven won't come through clearly. There is a certain kind of clarity that only comes when you're emotionally free. free from needing validation, free from proving a point, free from holding on to what someone did to you, free from trying to manage how people see you. Most of your spiritual confusion is tied to emotional entanglement. You can't move forward when your soul is still stuck in what happened yesterday. You can't walk in peace while being chained to resentment. Your heart can't be open to revelation while it's still bleeding from rejection. And hear me, your emotions are real, but they are not your ruler. You're allowed to feel them, but you're not meant to follow them. Emotions are indicators, not dictators. And maturity comes when you can feel something deeply, but still choose wisely. Too many people sabotage their next move because they made a decision based on how they felt in the moment instead of what they were called to in the spirit. That's why emotional discipline is not just personal, it's prophetic. When you master your emotions, you unlock the frequency of heaven. You begin to hear the still small voice with new sharpness. You don't just react, you respond. You don't just guess, you discern. Emotional freedom doesn't mean you're numb. It means you're not controlled. It means you submitted your feelings to something higher. When you stop letting your emotions lead, your spirit starts to rise. That's when you begin to see clearly. That's when God starts to reveal things that were always there, but your soul was too loud to notice. And sometimes clarity doesn't come from answers. It comes from alignment. And alignment happens when your soul stops dragging your spirit and starts following it. There's nothing more dangerous than someone who is emotionally free and spiritually clear. That kind of person is steady in the storm. That kind of person isn't swayed by applause or absence. They hear God and move with precision. That's what this year demands. Not more noise, not more reaction, but more clarity, more stillness, more discipline. And to get that, you've got to release the emotions that have had too much control for too long. Peace is not just a feeling, it's a position. And when you choose peace, you choose power. Emotional freedom is the path. Spiritual clarity is the reward. You were created to lead your emotions, not live in them. Your emotions are part of you, but they were never designed to drive you. They're passengers, not the pilot. The moment you let how you feel dictate how you move, you start handing over authority to something unstable. Emotions change with the weather. They shift with conversations, memories, disappointments. And if you build your life around what shifts, you'll never be grounded in what's eternal. You can't be consistent in your calling if you're constantly fluctuating with your feelings. There's a difference between acknowledging how you feel and being controlled by it. A mature person doesn't ignore their emotions. They manage them. They measure them against the truth of who they are and what they've been called to do. And sometimes that means making decisions that don't align with how you feel in the moment. Growth happens when you can look at fear and still move forward. When you can feel offended but still choose peace. When you can feel tired but still show up in excellence. That's not emotional suppression. That's emotional leadership. Too many people are stuck not because they lack ability, but because they've made emotions their compass. They only move when they feel ready. They only obey when they feel inspired. They only forgive when they feel like it. But feelings lie. Feelings will tell you you're not enough when God already called you chosen. Feelings will tell you to quit when you're only one step away from breakthrough. Feelings will convince you that your past disqualifies your future. And if you live in them long enough, you'll start believing that's truth. You've got to rise above that. You've got to stop waiting for emotions to give you permission to do what you were already anointed to do. Purpose doesn't wait on feelings. Destiny doesn't wait for comfort. And legacy is not built by those who react. It's built by those who respond with discipline. When you lead your emotions, you don't deny what you feel. You decide what deserves your attention. You sit with it, you learn from it, and then you move through it without letting it take control. This kind of discipline is what separates leaders from the crowd. It's what keeps vision clear when storms hit. It's what allows you to remain grounded when others fall apart. Because when you lead your emotions, you create stability, not just for yourself, but for everything and everyone connected to you. You become the calm in the chaos. You become the anchor in the winds. You become unshakable, not because you don't feel, but because you refuse to be ruled. You were never called to live life at the mercy of your emotions. You were called to walk in authority, to be led by vision, not moods, to obey purpose, not pressure. So lead them. Lead your anger into healing. Lead your fear into faith. Lead your pain into power. And watch how your life aligns with destiny. Attachment to outcomes blocks divine flow. When you become obsessed with how things should look, how things should end, how people should respond, you trap yourself in a cage of expectation. And that cage doesn't just limit your peace, it limits your ability to flow with God. The moment you attach your obedience to a specific result, you stop walking by faith and start living by condition. And that's not trust, that's control. And control is the enemy of flow. Flow means trusting that what you sow in obedience will come back in purpose, even if it doesn't come back in the way you expected. The divine doesn't operate on human timelines. It doesn't need your predictions or your backup plans. It needs your surrender. And surrender doesn't look like begging. It looks like letting go of the need to be in charge, letting go of the pressure to see instant results, letting go of the script you wrote in your head, and being open to the one heaven is writing. Because attachment to outcomes is subtle. It's when you serve, but secretly hope they applaud. It's when you give, but expect it to come back from the same place. It's when you obey, but get angry when it doesn't go your way. That's not flow. That's manipulation, disguised as faith. When you detach from outcomes, you unlock peace. Peace that says, even if it doesn't happen the way I thought, I know it's working for my good. Peace that says, I did what I was called to do, and that's enough. Peace that isn't rooted in control, but in alignment. Some of you are frustrated, not because God didn't move, but because he didn't move the way you wanted. And that frustration is proof of your attachment. But you can't demand divine results on human terms. You gotta trust the process, even when the process looks different than the promise. You gotta understand that obedience is success, regardless of the visible outcome. Because sometimes the outcome you expected would have limited you. Sometimes the closed door you cried over was the very thing that protected your calling. And if you're only willing to praise when the result matches your desire, you're not really surrendered. You're still negotiating with God. Detach. Not from purpose, not from hope, but from the obsession with how it all has to play out. Your job is not the outcome. Your job is obedience. And obedience produces fruit you may not even see yet. You plant today and reap in seasons you didn't expect. But if you're too attached to what it should look like, you'll miss what it is becoming. So flow, release the need to control, and trust that what's for you will not pass you. Trust that God is bigger than your plan, and trust that the only thing you ever needed to hold on to was faith, not the outcome. Peace is the new power in a world addicted to noise, movement, and constant reaction. The person who can remain calm is the one who carries true authority. Real power is not in how loud you can be, how fast you can move, or how quickly you can respond. It's in your ability to be still and unbothered when everything around you is pulling for your attention. When you stop reacting to every trigger, every insult, every delay, you step into a place of mastery. Because peace is not passive, it's a decision. It's not the absence of problems, it's the presence of clarity in the middle of them. You have to understand that the enemy doesn't always try to defeat you by destruction. Sometimes he uses distraction, and nothing distracts you faster than chaos. When you're constantly reacting, constantly offended, constantly trying to prove yourself, you give your power away piece by piece. But the moment you choose peace, you take it back. You send a message to your soul, to the world, and to the spirit realm. I am no longer available for emotional turbulence. I am no longer a slave to external chaos. I am rooted in something deeper. Peace is spiritual discipline. It requires restraint. It requires faith. It requires you to look at things that used to shake you and say, not this time. You won't get my energy today, And that kind of peace doesn't make you weak. It makes you untouchable. Because when you have peace, you have perspective. You don't jump to conclusions. You don't waste time on things that won't matter tomorrow. You don't let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. That's strength. That's power. When you walk in peace, you walk with God because he moves in stillness. His voice is heard in quiet. And some of you have been missing clarity, not because God isn't speaking, but because your life is too loud to hear. Peace positions you to receive. Peace protects your purpose. Peace preserves your power. That's why the world tries to rob it from you at every turn, every delay, every disrespect, every disappointment. It's not just about the situation. It's about your reaction. It's about pulling you out of your calm so you step out of your authority. But you don't have to take the bait. You don't have to attend every argument. You don't have to match energy with chaos. You get to choose stillness. You get to choose grace. You get to respond with wisdom. That's what 2025 demands. Not louder voices, not quicker tempers, but deeper roots. So let the storm rage. Let the opinions fly. Let the delay happen. If you have peace, you've already won. Because peace is the evidence that you trust God more than circumstances. It's proof that your anchor is internal, not external. And once you find that kind of peace, you'll never trade it again. Not for applause, not for approval, not even for understanding. That peace is your power. Detachment is not disconnection. It's divine alignment. It's not about turning cold, becoming emotionless, or cutting people off out of bitterness. It's about tuning in to what God is really saying, really doing, and really requiring of you in this season. When you detach from things that no longer serve your growth, your calling, or your peace, you're not walking away. You're walking toward, you're moving in the direction of purpose. And sometimes that direction requires that you release things, people, and identities that were only meant to be temporary. Detachment is not a rebellion against love. It's a response to clarity. And clarity often demands distance. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in life don't come through addition. They come through subtraction. There are weights you're still carrying, not because you need them, but because you're afraid of who you might be without them. You've been holding on to familiar chaos, convinced that it's better than the unknown, but the unknown is where alignment lives. It's where miracles happen. It's where you meet the version of yourself you've been praying to become. And the truth is, you can't meet that version if you're still clinging to what that version had to outgrow. Divine alignment is not just about being in the right place. It's about being in the right posture. It's about having a heart that is free from idols, ego, and emotional entanglements. And detachment helps you get there. It teaches you to love deeply without losing yourself, to serve passionately without being consumed, to hope boldly without controlling outcomes. It's balance, it's strength, it's spiritual maturity, and most importantly, it's trust. You can't fully trust God and still insist on owning everything together yourself. That's why detachment is not an act of abandonment. It's an act of faith. It's you saying, God, I trust you enough to let this go. I trust you enough to stop forcing what's not flowing. I trust you enough to believe that what's meant for me will never require me to beg, chase, or lose myself in the process. There's a kind of peace that only comes when you stop wrestling with what no longer fits. And when you detach, you create space for divine replacements. God never takes without intending to fill. But if your hands are full of what you won't release, you'll never have the capacity to receive. Detachment frees your spirit to move with the wind of God. It makes room for the unexpected blessing, the sudden shift, the open door you couldn't see before because your sight was blurred by what you were trying so hard to keep. This is about being unfeeling. This is about being unshakable. It's about being grounded in something higher than attachment, something deeper than emotion. It's about walking with a light heart, a clear mind, and a surrendered soul. That's divine alignment. That's power. That's where transformation begins. Let go, not to disconnect from the world, but to reconnect with what truly matters, your purpose, your peace, and your God. When you detach, you become dangerous. Not dangerous in a destructive way, but in a deeply powerful, unshakable way. You become the kind of person who can't be manipulated, can't be distracted, can't be swayed by fear, approval, or pressure. You become grounded, not because the world around you got quieter, but because you no longer give everything access to your soul. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. It means you no longer rely on temporary things to define your worth, to regulate your joy, or to shape your identity. And that makes you powerful beyond measure, because most people are still enslaved to the opinions of others, to the need to be seen, to the fear of rejection. When you detach, you stop being reactive. You're no longer a puppet to the emotions or expectations of other people. You no longer need applause to feel validated or agreement to feel certain. Your power comes from within, not from the room, not from the comments, not from the approval or disapproval of man. You walk into spaces with authority because you've already settled who you are in the secret place. And people can feel that. They may not understand it. They may not like it, but they can't ignore it. That kind of presence disrupts environments. That kind of energy shakes atmospheres. Most people are bound because they are too attached to who likes them, attached to who stays, attached to what they think they deserve. But when you detach, you're not driven by outcome. You're driven by obedience. You don't chase results. You follow alignment, and that shift alone makes you a different kind of person. A person who can be trusted with more. A person who moves in silence and power. A person who understands that elevation doesn't come from striving. It comes from surrender. Detachment is spiritual warfare in disguise. It's how you tear down strongholds of insecurity, fear, and pride. Because when you detach from needing constant reassurance, constant control, constant comfort, you rise into your true self, your God-centered, purpose-driven, assignment-focused self. And that version of you is not to be played with. That version of you doesn't get thrown off by a delay or a betrayal or a closed door. That version of you doesn't break under pressure, but stands up in it. Because now you're anchored. Now you're discerning. Now you've become dangerous to everything that used to control you. You've got to get to a place where your peace is not negotiable, where your work is not for debate, where your purpose is not up for discussion. That's what detachment gives you. It doesn't take away your heart. It sharpens your mind. It doesn't isolate you. It elevates you. It frees you from the need to belong everywhere, so you can finally align with where you were always meant to be. And once you taste that level of freedom, you'll never go back, because detachment didn't make you distant. It made you powerful. It made you untouchable. It made you dangerous. You owe it to your future to stop bleeding for your past. There comes a moment in your journey where you have to make a decision. Will you keep rehearsing what hurt you, or will you finally step into what's ahead of you? Because you can't carry both. You can't keep picking at old wounds and expect new doors to open. You can't keep grieving over what didn't work and expect to have the energy to build what's next. The weight of the past is not just emotional. It's spiritual. It drains your vision. It clouds your judgment. It keeps you locked in patterns that feel familiar but are fundamentally destructive. Some of you are still emotionally bleeding from people who are no longer even in your life. Still wounded from words spoken over you in childhood. Still living according to a narrative that no longer matches your reality. And the dangerous part is you've carried it so long, it now feels normal. But just because pain becomes familiar doesn't mean it's meant to stay. There is no healing in replaying memories that God already brought you through. There is no glory in making your trauma your identity. At some point, you must decide that what happened to you no longer gets to speak for you. Healing is not forgetting, it's choosing to stop reliving what you can't change. Choosing to stop watering dead situations. Choosing to stop bleeding on people who didn't cut you. Your future is too important to keep bleeding from battles that ended years ago. It's not about denying what happened. It's about refusing to let it define you any longer. Because as long as you identify with the pain, you'll disqualify yourself from the promise. You'll say no to opportunities because you still feel broken. You'll sabotage relationships because you still expect betrayal. You'll pray for change, but think like a victim. And God can't bless the mask. He can only elevate the healed version of who you really are. The future you is bold, clear, whole, and fearless. But to become that, the present you has to stop bleeding, has to stop carrying guilt that was never yours, has to stop feeling responsible for saving people who had no intention of growing, has to stop asking why it happened and start asking, what do I do with it now? Because the pain has a purpose, but only if you release it into purpose. Let it make you wiser, stronger, deeper, but don't let it keep you stuck. Don't let it cost you another year, another connection, another assignment. You owe it to your future to walk free, to love again, to try again, to build again. You owe it to the people waiting on your voice, your gift, your courage. They don't need your perfect story. They need your healed presence. So stop the bleeding. Stop the rehearsing. Stand up in grace. Your past was real, but it doesn't own your future. Let it go so you can rise. Let it go so you can live. You've heard every word for a reason, because 2025 is not waiting on your fear, your excuses, or your past. It's waiting on you. The healed you, the focused you, the disciplined, emotionally free, spiritually aligned version of you who no longer needs to chase validation, beg for peace, or hold on to what's already been released. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your growth. You don't owe your past any more tears. You don't owe your pain a seat at your table, but you do owe it to yourself to rise. You do owe it to your calling to stop playing small. You do owe it to your future to finally move like you believe what God has already spoken over your life. No more shrinking, no more bleeding, no more clinging to the old when the new is ready to be born through you. Let go of what was. Step fully into what is, because this is the year you stop surviving and start becoming. This is the year you detach, align, and elevate. Not for applause, not for approval, but because you made a decision. I owe it to myself. Now move accordingly. Tools.